Hi everyone. We're now going to look at what happens when functions don't show up nicely on the calculator. So the first thing I want to look at is the first function here, y1, but notice that both of these equal signs are highlighted. So if I go to the graph function, they're both going to graph. So instead, to make only the first function graph, I'm going to go over here and highlight the equal sign. And if you hit the enter, notice that the equal sign is no longer highlighted. That means that y2 has been turned off and only y1 will graph, which is exactly what I want to do. So let's see what happens here. So I'm going to hit graph, and notice that I'm just mostly on the blue line, or the blue is mostly on the x-axis, and then right around between x equals -2 and x equals 2, I kind of get off the graph. And notice that, this seems really weird. So notice that the graph looks to be entirely contained between the y values 0 and 1. So let's restrict our window to do that. Our y values to only show those in the window. So we're going to go to this window button, which is right next to the y equals, and we're going to keep our x from -10 to 10. But actually, before I do that, I should explain each of these. So the x min right here means that that's the minimum x value that's going to be graphed. This is going to be the maximum x value that is graphed, and then the scale means that this is like labeling your graph. Each tick mark is worth 1. And then the same thing with the y. The minimum y value, the maximum y value, and the y scale tells you what each tick mark is worth. We will not worry about xres and delta x and trace step. So here we said we want to restrict our values of y from 0 to 1. And since we're on that interval, let's make y in steps of a tenth. So if we graph this, notice that, so every tick mark on the x-axis here is 1, and every tick mark on the y-axis is a tenth, starting at 0 and going to 1. So notice that this function looks to be between 0 and 1, and the most of the values that are not near 0 occur between -2 and 2, and that would be actually correct. We can actually zoom in on the x-axis, and we'll see that the blue line will never actually touch the x-axis if we zoom in far enough. But this is actually the best view of this graph. So this is the good graph of e to the -x squared, which is a very important function in probability. It comes up in calculus 2 and calc 1. So this function gets around. So notice that one thing you can do is you can restrict the y values. Now let's look at our other function. So let's turn this one off and hit down and turn y2 on, and let's graph this. Notice we absolutely get nothing on here. So let's set our table set, let's go to table set, so second window, and let's go back to auto. And let's start with 0 and go in increments of 1, and let's look at our table. And notice I get a bunch of errors, and that means that the function is undefined for those values of x. So we need to find where x is going to be starting to be defined. So let's hit the down arrow, and this is going to take a while because I know what value will show up first. So we keep going and 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 going. And why did I choose such a high number? I don't know. But we keep going. And in fact, it's going to be a ways, so actually I'm going to wait for this to stop. And so this is one way you can do it. You keep scrolling until you get to a number, but to be honest, you could be scrolling for a really, really long time. We don't know if it's going to stop giving us numbers at 60, which it's not, or start giving us numbers at 1,000,000. We just don't know unless we know something about the function. And apparently I hit the bottom key a lot, so we'll keep on going here. And we stopped at 73. And so if you know something about the function, then maybe you can make a reasonable guess. And in fact, that's what we do. We know something about the square root of x minus 100. Well, everything under the square root have to be positive. So these values of x have to be greater than 100. So if we go to window, I'm just going to change, to table set. And I just turn the table start to, let's say, 90. Oops, I don't want to graph it. Notice that, voila. That's French for here it is, if you didn't know. We start at 100 and now we start getting numbers. So this suggests that we should start our x values in our window at 100 and go from there. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to move our window from 100, and I guess let's go to 110 with scales of 1. And notice that the y values we're always going to get out of the square root are always to be positive, but they'll probably get pretty big. So let's let y go from 0 to 10 in scales of 1, and let's look at our graph. And sure enough, our graph actually shows up. So I'm going to start here in the next video, and I'm going to show you how to get back to our normal screen. So, see you then.